Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for the latest in our series of webinars to help you create the path ahead. In today's session, we will be joined by Jeremy Sturt at Just Add Water, who will be sharing thoughts on how to take control in uncertain times and rediscover yourself. We will focus on understanding the thresholds that we face in life, what to do when we are facing them, explore the attributes of our character that will support us in times of crisis, reassess our resources, and how to use them, as well as provide tools and models to help us rethink who we could become. We're joined today by an audience from across APAC, so you're all going to be on mute during the presentation, but I do encourage you to ask any questions you might have as we go along, just by typing into the questions panel. We'll be moderating them as we go along and trying to answer as many questions as possible at the end of the presentation. We also need you to have a pen and piece of paper handy, if that's okay, just so that you can capture any thoughts or reflections along the way. If we can't answer your question today, we'll be sure to reach out to you directly after the webinar. So firstly, let me introduce myself. I'm Indy Lachar, and I'm the Group Talent Development Director at Robert Walters. In the Talent Development team, we support our leaders and leadership teams across the globe to be the very best version of themselves via tailored and bespoke talent development programs. We're honoured today to have Jeremy from Just Add Water joining us to present on the topic. So without further ado, I'd like to invite Jeremy to introduce himself and continue with the next section of this webinar. Jeremy, over to you.
Thank you, Indy, and welcome to today's session entitled Path Ahead, Rediscovering You. To get full benefit, as Indy has said, from this hour, you will need 3 to 4 pieces of paper and a pen and a pencil, or pen and pencil. So back in May, I led a session entitled Taking Control in Uncertainty, which also featured the tagline Rediscovering You. I probably need a more imaginative copywriter than myself, I guess. But if you did attend that session, then I hope that you can see this webinar as a continuation of that conversation for yourself. And if you're new to Just Add Water and myself, then I hope you enjoy the next 60 minutes and gain some tools and insight to support you in times of challenge. So why are you here? Need a change? Stuck in a rut? Just been let go? It has been an awfully long year, and it can appear to not be getting better. Nothing quite prepares us for that sinking feeling of either rejection or being stuck, no matter how resilient we believe we are. But we can take this moment and plan for what happens next and in our future. And what is true is that the world over, we are facing choices that we've not had to for years. And as Yuval Harari beautifully states, the storm will pass, but the choices we make now could change our lives for years to come. So taking the time to stop, pause, reflect, and consider has never been more important. My name is Jeremy Sturt, and with me today is Victoria Minty, a presence and impact coach, as well as a fine actress based in Singapore. Victoria, welcome.
Hi, Jeremy. Thanks for having me. Hi, everyone.
Delighted to have you. What you on about? Delighted you joined us. Victoria and myself are going to spend the next hour exploring what happens when we face adversity and what we can do to reset ourselves, realign, and renew for a fresh series of adventures in both work and life. But before we begin, let us introduce ourselves. So Victoria, would you mind going first? Who are you and what do you do?
Thank you, Jeremy. I'm Victoria Minty. I'm originally from the UK and I now live in Singapore, where I've been for the past 10 years. So I'm a theatre actress, as Jeremy has mentioned, and I trained at drama school in London. Prior to that, I did a bachelor's degree in psychology and anthropology. So my education took a few twists and turns, and after finishing drama school, I pursued theatre in London and continue to do that in Singapore. So acting is really my first love, and I'm very proud to say I've actually established a theatre company here as well. So alongside that runs another business of mine, which is as a communication skills coach. I'm pretty focused on helping people with their public speaking and presentations, things like that. It began when I was invited as an actor to join a really big training program to come in and role play with some of the participants. And I realized that there was a whole world of people struggling with these kinds of skills. It's not something that we often have time to stop and think about how we're interacting with one another, or how we're coming across when we give a pitch or an interview or something like that. So I really wanted to set about using what I learned from my theatre world to help people when they're in front of an audience in their world. So that's where I am today, 10 years on, and really enjoying that in Singapore and around the region, and of course online now as well. So I get to meet lots of different people.
Fantastic. Well, and congratulations on having 2 careers in this quite challenging year that we have.
Yeah,
so
the
let's
theatre
talk
career.
Well, I can understand, but having a theatre company in Singapore, that's terrific stuff. So myself and Just Have Water, we've been working in the field of human and personal development for the last 25 years. But personally, I wasn't always here. As a 20-year-old on leaving college, I had plenty of dreams and set about fulfilling them as quickly as possible. I began my life working as a stage manager in London's West End theatre world, developing, creating and producing musicals that travelled the globe. Some of these shows were highly successful and continue to run today. Others took months, years of effort and toil and failed to last 4 days. You learn a lot about resilience and capabilities in the face of adversity. And there are few more resilient folk, as I'm sure Victoria will testify to, than show people. I moved into this world when McKinsey, the management company consultant, came calling. I walked into their extraordinary lobby at number 1 Jermyn Street in London, dominated by a sculpture of the world with flashing lights denoting their offices, wearing a scruffy yellow sweatshirt and jeans, and thinking, what have I agreed to here? Well, I crossed that threshold as they asked my partner and I to consider bringing the creative arts into the world of business and corporations. It was by no means an immediate pivot, I'll be honest. It personally took me years to recognize that this is where I wanted to be and to play. And play is what we do. With clients worldwide, we encourage people to dream and to turn those dreams into reality that is fulfilling for them. And our work bridges the arts and the business. We all have the capability to build bridges between logic and art, using stories and metaphors to help us make sense of challenging situations and provide richness to what may appear hard work. And exploring ourselves and thinking about who we are and what we want to do is hard work, which we often shy away from. So Victoria, you, like myself, and probably more than me now, lead a double life of theatre and business, as I mentioned. How do you juggle both, and how do you set yourself up for exploration when times are tough?
Well, it's been a journey, and every year is slightly different, and I learn more lessons on both sides of this life. I would say that the chief thing that I am carrying with me these days is that I am not trying to be 2 people. I'm me when I'm in both of these worlds. And it's kind of, I liken it to when I'm playing a role on stage. So if I'm trying to become a character, I try to find all the things about me that are similar to that character. I don't focus on the differences. So that makes my job easier. So that's what I do now when either when I'm working in theatre or working in corporate training. It's what are my strengths? What is it inherently about me that makes me good at these 2 things, so I can bring those skills to one side or to the other, and I can almost sort of try and sew together these 2 seemingly quite different lives. So it's who am I, what am I bringing to the table, really owning that, really figuring out what I'm good at, and the more I play to my strengths, the better use I have of my energy, so I'm not completely exhausted at the end of every week, because I think if you're trying to be lots of different people, that just really wears you out. And I have 2 young children to come home to, so I think that lesson's been really, really good for me, to help me conserve a little bit of energy for me time as well at the end of the week.
So juggling not only theatre and business, but also a full-time mother as well.
Yes, that's right. My upper body strength is amazing.
Well, you also mentioned a couple of things there, which we will definitely touch upon, which is playing to your strengths and actually utilizing your energy and thinking about your energy. Now, in taking control in uncertainty, I provided a framework for the journey that we are all on in life that has at its heart 4 fundamental questions that we need to continually ask of ourselves. This is a universal framework that has been used by storytellers the world over and shapes every Hollywood film you have ever seen. It provides the scriptwriter what we call the character arc. the backstory of the hero, why they choose to go on the journey, the personal strengths they draw upon, and how they can overcome the many perils they face along the way. In the path ahead today, we will focus on understanding the thresholds that we face in life, what to do when we are facing them, explore the attributes of our character that will support us in times of crisis, those strengths that Victoria was referring to, reassess our resources and how to use them, and provide a couple of tools and models to help us rethink who we could become. The first thing we have to remind ourselves of is that we are all the hero of our own story. No matter the chapter you are on, whether successful or challenging, you are the central character. In The Shawshank Redemption, a high-flying banker, Andrew Dufresne, is sent to jail for a crime he didn't commit. He struggles to deal with his changed circumstances, and it's only when he makes peace with himself and stops fighting the reasons why he is there that he is able to make a difference for himself and those around him. Writers and life coaches alike call it owning the narrative, being clear that your behaviors and actions have an impact on other people and the circumstances you find yourself in. So how did you get here? We all have, in some way, big or small, let the pain of rejection, the recognition of defeat, the challenge of being stuck, of our actions and ways not enabling us to be successful in achieving a desired intent. In storytelling, it is called the time of crisis, the period where the hero has to dig deep and rediscover themselves, take time to reflect, and face into their innermost challenges. And this is challenging for a number of reasons. Whether we are thrown into the time of crisis by circumstance or others, or slowly slip into it by our own actions and behaviors, we have to recognize it when it occurs and own it, if we want to both use the time wisely and escape it. So operating in this ambiguity zone is not easy, and we generally cannot accept chaos. We feel compelled to and seek to order chaos. Operating here requires you to be bold in your thinking, to disrupt your patterns and mindset, and manage competing and maybe conflicting ideas at the same time. In 1969, Kubler-Ross described 5 stages that represent the normal range of feelings we experience when dealing with change in our lives. Known as the Kubler-Ross model, it is used to understand how we react to change. And they are coming up on the screen now. Stage 1, shock and denial. Stage 2, anger. Stage 3, bargaining. Stage 4, depression. And stage 5, acceptance. And as you will note, at the bottom left-hand corner there's a grid here of energy and integration of change. All change involves loss at some level. And these are normal reactions we have to tragic or challenging news. They are coping mechanisms that we need to move through in order to manage this change. And we don't move through the stages one at a time in a neat, linear, step-by-step manner as my grid is showing. That would be far too easy. What happens is that we occupy different stages at different times and can even move back to stages we have been in before. Stages can also last for different periods of time and will replace each other or exist side by side at times. We can also get stuck in the stages and find it difficult or impossible to move on. We have to understand how to manage our energy and how we integrate any change required. So Victoria, dealing with change, and as we can highlight there from the grid, it's very easy to look at it in a linear fashion. How do you cope with change? And bearing in mind, I think your youngest is 4 months old.
Yes, and I can almost just hear him in the background, like it's on cue there. Yes, I have a 4-month-old baby, and just having a look at this model today really gives me comfort, because I now know that all these phases that I'm going through because the big change in my life is a whole new human being to take care of. So I've definitely felt myself moving back and forward between these different feelings and different phases of change. So yeah, it's comforting to know that that's normal human response. I think that I guess that's kind of me on like a zoomed out macro level. Then I think about other kinds of crises in my work, and I guess a little microcosm of crisis and change for me is what I'd call the actor's nightmare.
Yep.
So that's, if you haven't heard of that before, the actor's nightmare, of course, is you're on stage playing your role in front of an audience of who knows how many hundreds, thousands of people, and you open your mouth to say your next line, and your mind is a blank. That's the actor's nightmare. You've forgotten what your next line is, and you feel completely like you are out of control. You almost it's like an out of body experience. Okay, so first of all, you feel like you're suspended and floating, and suddenly, you know, untethered from the earth. What am I going to do? Then your body has some other physical reactions, you know, usually sweating or shaking or heart palpitations. Gosh, no, what else? So it's really like a visceral response that you've got in that moment, and it's only a split second, but it feels like a year of stress. So what do? How are you supposed to work your way out of that crisis? Because you're in front of this audience, they're expecting the show to go on, they're expecting you to do your job properly. So I was sort of trying to break this down to figure out what are the stages to find my way out of the actor's nightmare. So first, there's that physical response. What's the second thing I do? The second thing I do is look to find eye contact with my other actor on stage, because that does a couple of things. First of all, it is an acknowledgement between myself and that other actor that something's gone wrong. Okay, so we can silently communicate. We're very mystic like that. We can silently communicate to one another that I've forgotten my line. So acknowledge the problem, and also that eye contact, it tethers me to something when I'm feeling untethered. So I suppose it helps me to find to bring myself back into the moment, because I think the worst thing we can try to do is to think our way out of a crisis like this.
Yeah.
You know, we think we're so smart and so rational, we must be able to find the right line that I'm supposed to say. That I tried it, it doesn't work. So I find something, just holding eye contact helps me to just be present and be clear, just to get my mind clear rather than get my mind racing. And that holds the space and holds the moment. It means your audience usually don't notice that something's gone wrong, because the characters are still interacting with their eye contact. And then I think the final thing is either you remember the line in that moment or your other actor saves you. Okay, so that's the happy ending to the story, but it isn't. There's a final part to the story. And the final piece for getting your way, for moving on from this crisis, is to let it go. Because I've definitely found in the past, if I've forgotten a line and then I continue on with the scene somehow, if I continue to beat myself up in here about forgetting the line, I'm going to trip up again. So I've really had to learn how to let go, how to give myself a break. Yes, you made a mistake, but move on. The show must go on. The play continues. So that is kind of a really crucial one that for me, I've really had to learn to get over it.
And I think if I take that and I put it into maybe a context for people who are feeling stuck, and lovely analogy using the actor's nightmare there. The first thing is, this is very visceral. This is very physical when we feel stuck, and we do very often try to intellectualize our way out of it. But quite often we have to feel our way out, as you talked about. There is a physical reaction that we get when we are stuck, and we need to feel our way out of it as much as we need to use our intellect to get out of it. Acknowledging what happened is often very hard. Recognizing where we are is tough, and that's what we need to actually explore as well. And then to reach out and seek collaboration. One of the greatest things that we can do as human beings is collaborate with other human beings. One of the biggest challenges we face is trying to collaborate with people who have a different mindset to us. So we need to actually get other people's help, and then letting go. And this is one of the things we'll talk about a little bit. So running through all the stages of the change cycle is hope. Hope is the belief that there will be a positive end to the change, and that there is some meaning that will eventually be learned from the experience. This is an important indicator of our ability to successfully navigate change. Even in the most difficult circumstances, there is an opportunity for growth and learning. Hope is a key part of what is known as the growth mindset. Carol Dweck famously said in a 2007 book, Mindset, outlined the importance of it and how you think in your capability to fulfill our potential. Mindset is the set of habitual or characteristic mental attitudes that determine how you will interpret and respond to situations. Our minds are a complex mental state involving beliefs and feelings and values and assumptions that make us act in certain ways. Sounds like a lot. Well, it is. We're complex souls. The mind is like many muscles. We have the ability to continually improve and enhance our mindset, shift the way we think, and impact our behavior. So now Dweck identified two broad mindsets, growth and fixed. Growth mindset, as it says there, believes that intelligence can be developed through being curious and experiencing different things. A fixed mindset believes that intelligence is static and once matured remains fairly constant. So as a growth mindset, we embrace challenge, we persist despite those challenges, we see hard work as a path to mastery, we learn from feedback and criticism, and we get inspired by the success of others. Whereas a fixed mindset avoids the challenge, we give up when faced with obstacles, see hard work as not necessary, maybe ignore feedback and all criticism, and is threatened by the success of others. Why is this important? Well, our mindset, whether fixed or growth, shapes our behaviors, which impacts the practices or habits we put into action. And they create the outcomes we deliver that then go and influence our mindset. And so the cycle continues. We are understanding and undertaking this cycle all of the time in our everyday lives. And as we grow our awareness of it and how we can impact every element in a very conscious way, it will allow us to make individual and collective decisions that can ignite possibilities for ourselves. Exploring this cycle is extremely useful, particularly when we feel stuck or at a loss. So, Victoria, how do you get rid of any fixed mindsets that occur in your both either work in business or indeed as you work as an actor?
Yeah, well, it's such a powerful comparison. When you see the growth and the fixed side by side, yeah. I can immediately think of lots of examples from my own life and my own work. I can also, in this cycle that you shared on the slide, I see that a lot in my clients that they're coming and saying, you know, the mindset is, I'm really scared of public speaking. And then that feeds into, I'm not going to do my rehearsals, I'm going to turn down doing the speaking. That turns into a mediocre performance. You know, we feel as a shoddy outcome, and then it perpetuates. So, okay, so for myself, I think recently for me, I was coming back from maternity leave, back to sort of reigniting my business and feeling really daunted and I really froze. I was just paralyzed. I didn't know what to do because the world, whilst I was on maternity leave, the world has experienced a global pandemic and all work came online. So that, you know, there's a big change. So how do I possibly catch up with that, right? That was my mindset, my fear, my feeling. And I started to have a few conversations with people, and I think there've been a few moments that have helped me to kind of unstick a fixed mindset. So if I give you an example, so I'm thinking about business development, right, for my business, and I suppose my mindset was business development means cold calling. I hate cold calling, therefore I'm terrible at business development. So I don't do anything, which means I'm not gonna get any work. It's like I remember that Einstein quote, the definition of insanity is repeating the same behavior over and over and expecting a different result. Yeah. So I had to give myself a shake, and I had to look at, okay, if cold calling is not my thing, then what could I do? What are the things that I would look forward to doing that would actually contribute to my business development? So I really had to break it down and look at what's a small, easy thing that I could do that, you know, that my strengths play into it naturally, right? So rather than going for something that really feels unnatural to me, what would feel good? What would I actually feel really excited about doing? So I think if I use like an image, if you sort of see, if you're stuck with something and you're not making a change, you've built up a wall and you think there's no way I can knock that wall down, but maybe I can move one brick of that wall. So taking smaller steps. So I wanted to run everybody through an exercise for yourselves now. If you get your pen and your piece of paper, the first thing you need to do in this exercise is to write down one of the situations in your life where you want to make a change, but you haven't. Could be personal life, could be professional. Okay. So probably the first thing that comes into your head is the best thing to work on. Yeah. So let's not censor ourselves too much.
All right, I've got something.
You've got something in mind. Great, great, great. Okay. The next thing I want you to write down, everyone, is why do you think you've resisted making that change? Okay. So it could be something we've talked about, visceral reactions, right? Maybe you don't feel good about doing it. Maybe it's too hard. Maybe you don't have time, right? Maybe there's people getting in your way. Any number of things. Why have you resisted making a change? Okay, so take a note of that. That's your fixed mindset, right?
Okay.
Now I want you to think of not how are you going to make the huge change, how are you going to get to the end goal. Don't worry about that. Think about the tiniest step forward that you could make. So something really small, something that you think you could do in your sleep, something that would be really easy for you, would feel natural for you, would feel maybe exciting and joyful for you. So for me, I'll give you go back to my example. I don't want to do cold calling, but I loved the idea of, okay, I'm going to think of the 3 clients who I loved working with, right? Let's write down their names. Okay, I'm going to send a quick message to that one person because I know we got on really well, and I'm just going to be honest with them about how I'm feeling about getting back into work. I'm going to start a conversation with that one person. So that's how I broke it down. And so if you've got that on paper, your one small step, your next job is to put 5 minutes in your diary to execute that one small step. And then that's one brick in the wall that you've moved, and then you go into the next one. So it's got to be achievable, small things to start to change the mindset.
It's a really good point about small steps. And as Peter Drucker once said, if you want something new, you have to stop doing something old, as you quite rightly say. And one of the hardest lessons that we do discuss with successful people who want something more is having to let go of what has made them successful in order to become something different or better than they are today. Small steps, as Victoria's highlighted. And if we have to create space in order to grow. So we're going to undertake a creating space exercise, taking another piece of paper and answering the following questions. What is the most significant thing that's happened in your life in the last month? Did it happen to you, or did you make it happen? Think about that. What is the best thing about your life right now? And finally, what is the one thing you would love to change? So this is building upon Victoria's point of earlier small steps. So very quickly, Victoria, any quick responses to those questions?
For me, yes. The biggest change for me was coming back to work in the last month from my maternity leave, as I've already mentioned. That was my decision. Yeah, a few different factors, but it was my decision. Best thing currently is my kids. Drive me crazy sometimes, but absolutely watching them learn and watching them discover the world is just joyous. They are filled with wonder and innocence and energy and passion and so much emotion. So that is really fascinating. I love that. Third question. One thing I'd love to change. Yes. So I wrote down a big musical production that I was cast in has unfortunately been postponed because all the theaters are closed thanks to COVID-19. And that felt like a huge blow, not just for me, actually for kind of the theater community across the board. Well, in every country, but obviously I'm in Singapore. And yeah, that was such a disappointment. And it really feels like I mean, there's nothing I can do about that.
So what are you going to do about it?
Well, okay, so if I think about why was I so looking forward to it, I feel like I haven't had a chance in Singapore to really do a lot of musical theatre, a lot of singing, and that's really my training and my first love, as I referred to earlier. I can't make the theatres open, but I suppose there are plenty of virtual places where I can
You can get
sing.
online.
I could get online. I could get online. Yeah, and why not? Absolutely. What is stopping me? My mindset is stopping me.
What is stopping you? You can do this.
Yeah.
Okay, so you can do that. So take your time to answer those questions. That's part one of our creating space exercise, taking small steps, as Victoria's highlighted. And as we know, the world is becoming ever more complex, and yet probably the best response may well be being more human and collaborative than we think. So we're going to continue this sort of creating space personal audit, if you like, for ourselves. So we'll move to part two. And on a piece of paper, I would like you to draw two columns as it shows there. Name the first column, for me, this is the left-hand column on your piece of paper, my attributes, and the second column, my skills. So let's define the words. Attribute, a quality that is inherent within you and can be nurtured. What are the qualities that you believe you possess and others have told you so? They could be empathy, courage, curiosity, generous, resilience, calm, maybe humble. Okay, so take a moment to reflect and capture the words. Maybe capture against that a note next to that attribute as to why that quality is important to you, or indeed seen by others, mentioned by your partner or by friends or by work colleagues. It is always good to note down a short story against particular attributes, because that will prompt you and give you a picture and remind you of when you were at your best. In the second column, my skills. Let's once again be clear on definition. Skill is an aptitude or competence appropriate for a particular job that can be taught. So your thoughts here could be a little bit more wide-ranging, from aptitudes such as adaptability, active listening, communication, mindfulness, through to more specific competencies as in educational or job-specific qualifications. A university degree, as it says there, Lean, Six Sigma, Prince 2, whatever it may be. And once again, take a moment to capture what is important for you and what you have achieved. Making a note as to how often you put that particular skill into action in your work or indeed in your life. Once again, stories help. So please do put a picture against it to recognize what that skill is and how you've used it in your past. Now, I'll give you a moment to think about that. Attributes and skills. It's really quite important. We do not often take the time and really spend the time when we are in a position where things might not be going well to recognize what we do have and what we have actually undertaken and achieved in our life. And it does give you a sense of power for yourself, as well as hopefully gives you a little bit more energy to recognize what you are good at. Part three of this creative space audit, fresh piece of paper. If I may, what motivates you? We're going to look at 9 main intrinsic motivators. Intrinsic meaning inherent within you, what you're good at, what you enjoy. These motivators are common to all of us, and they're outlined here, and you may want to mark out your paper as I've shown on this slide. On a scale of 0, it's not at all important to me, to 10, completely part of who I am and what motivates me. So let's just run around those motivators, as you can see here, and I'll go from the top. Expertise, so what are you good at? What are you really good at? Is that really important for you? Sense of meaning, how critical is that to you? Influence, how good are you at that? What does it really give you power and passion and energy? Material awards, house, car, good salary. Affiliation, do you like working in teams? Do you like being part of something bigger than yourself? Sense of security. Recognition, so understanding that people view you highly. Autonomy, to get on with things on your own. And of course, the last one, creativity. So to give you an idea about this, is coming up is my current, and I say current because our motivations do change over time, my current motivation wheel. So here it goes. Here's the purple line coming in for myself. So as you can see there, creativity and influence are really quite high for me, along with affiliation. I love to work in teams. I absolutely love it. Less worried about security, and that's only grown over time. If you'd asked me that 10 years ago, it would have been a far more important factor. But unlike Victoria, my children are grown up. So I'm less worried about security, and I'm more interested in being creative and being part of teams and giving something back in that way. This is quite important to help you actually understand what it is that indeed does motivate you at any particular time. And once again, I would venture to suggest that this is situational. So you're in a situation right now where you may be facing a challenge or rejection, or you're stuck, or you've just been here for a long time. Take a moment to actually fulfill these motivators out and think about where you are and why you actually believe that that is more of a motivation. One of these is more of a motivation for you now than the others are. Finally, part 4 of Creating Space Personal Audit, my ideal role. So this is the moment where we seek opportunities to dream, to explore what is possible for yourself. In many ways, to create a job description that is a perfect fit for who you are. So here are the questions. Firstly, as you can see on this piece of paper, name 5 things that you would be doing in an ideal role, and 5 things would you not be doing. What kind of career and role might be a great fit for your passion, experience, and abilities? And think about that in some depth. And it may be a career that you actually have never done before. Nothing wrong with that. And then what could that role or career look like? And what could that role or career feel like? Look and feel, 2 very different things. Once again, as Victoria mentioned earlier, when she's talked about the actor's nightmare, it's something you feel. You have to feel your way out of it. It isn't necessarily what you actually say or do or intellectualize your way out. So take a moment to fill in your ideal role. I would really encourage you to take that time. This is a really helpful exercise that does, even if you do not fulfill it, gives you some sense of things that you would like to be doing, and it maybe gives you some passion and energy about your next steps. So, a lot to reflect upon there. And before I invite Victoria to comment, because I would ask you to comment, Victoria, let's just revisit those exercises in Creating Space. Firstly, let's rename this period. I mean, I talked about a time of crisis, and it may be a storytelling phrase, but and language. But in time of crisis, this is a time for creating space for you and yourself. And the first exercise you undertook was a reflection on where you are right now. The second exercise was a personal audit of your attributes and skills. The third step was looking at those intrinsic motivators that drive us to do things on your motivator wheel. And the fourth step was dreaming about your ideal role. What would it have and what would you not do? So, Victoria, I've given you a lot to think about. Some reflections from you before we go any further.
Yeah, okay. Well, overall, I think I love doing work like this. I love sitting down with other people and having someone like yourself just walk me through this, because when I put things on paper, as you said, you may not necessarily ever get to the ideal role, but getting all of these things written down, it sharpens my senses when I go back to the world. So yeah. I start to see more opportunities. I see more connections between things. I have more interesting conversations because it just gets my brain working in a different way. I love to help people get the creative muscles working, right? That creative bit of the brain, because as I said earlier, often we don't have the time, the space. Often maybe that's not what our job is focused on. We're not in a creative role. So it's lovely, this final one, looking for how can I write the job description for my ideal role that completely fits me. It's amazing, right? Give yourself permission to just play with that for 5 minutes and just scribble down what it would look like. And I think that actually pays dividends. It's really it's a lovely thing. It's not about getting to that destination necessarily, but just about allowing yourself to think in a different way.
Absolutely. And let me ask you, what's an intrinsic motivator for you right now, out of the 9 that we put up?
I know, I love the wheel. I haven't had time to go around at all of them.
No,
I would say the ones at the top of my list, I've said meaning and expertise. So right. I want people to think I know what I'm talking about, and yep. I want to feel that it is useful beyond myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Those 2.
Victoria, we have a 5th and final step, which is preparation. So let's take your perfect role. How are you going to get it? Will you have to show up brilliantly to someone to achieve it? And if so, Victoria, you're the presence and impact coach here. What tips and tricks do you have about being present in conversations where you are trying to change your life?
Yeah, that's a big ask, isn't it? The stakes are high here. But often to get where we want to be, there's a lot of relationships that needs to be forged and a lot of conversations that we need to have. So communication is going to be really important. Well, okay, yeah, I'd love to share a few tips on this. The first couple of tips are what we do before we get into that room for that important conversation. So that's talking about your preparation and your rehearsal, right? An athlete wouldn't try and go and win the gold medal without doing some training, right? So in the field of communication, we call training rehearsal. So saying out loud the answers to some questions you think that are going to come up in that conversation. It really, you've got to love the sound of your own voice. And I don't mean that in a boastful way. I mean, we've got to be comfortable, right, with who we are and how we express our own story, right? There's more than one way to tell the story about who you are and what you want, right? So I think saying it out loud a few times in different ways, and maybe try it out on a couple of different people. Because you don't want the showtime, the big high stakes conversation to happen without that preparation already in the bag. I think something else, there's sort of then a threshold here. We spoke about thresholds earlier. That threshold moment of when you enter into the conversation, you've got to trust the preparation and leave it behind. Because the reason I call my training presence and impact is I don't think you can make an impact if you're not present with the people you're speaking to. And that really means moment to moment, your mind is focused there and on them. It's not thinking, oh, this worked better in rehearsal. Oh, this sounded better when I spoke to my husband or whatever. Trying to be that clear and focused and just connecting with that one person or with that small group. Again, we need some practice with this. A good thing to do is to learn how to focus on your breath. That's a really good way to drop into being present. Just notice, when are you inhaling and when are you exhaling? In through the nose and out through the mouth. And you can practice that when you're going to sleep at night. You'll have a great night's sleep. But it's really nice to practice it. You're doing it now, and look how relaxed you look. So the breathing technique is something that I'll always start with when I'm working with people. So it helps to calm down your nerves and all of that adrenaline that comes in when we really care and we're really, really desperate for something to go well. Often we're just getting more and more frantic, I suppose. So you want to just temper that with a bit of your breathing. Another really important thing is eye contact. So breathing and eye contact, again, will help to anchor you in that conversation so you're not distracted. And that goes for online as well. So make sure you look as much as possible at that person who you're speaking with, even if it's via video, and try not to look out your window. And I think finally, don't forget to listen.
Right.
You know, you are not singularly responsible for how a conversation goes, right? Even if you feel like you're the one who has to impress, do be curious about the other person. Listen actively to what they've got to say. Don't just wait for your chance to say something clever. Really, really listen to what they're sharing, pick up on it, use what they're offering to you, and allow that to stimulate what you want to say to them, right? So the conversation is nice and organic and authentic.
Okay, an awful lot there. I'll just pick up on a couple of things. Being present, I think, is one of the biggest challenges that we often face. As we mentioned earlier, our minds are complex things, and we have many thoughts running through them. But actually, forgetting about the past and neglecting the future to be present with someone can be really quite challenging, because we're always trying to actually think about other aspects of it. So being clear about the person in front of you and focus on them, really important. And I really do invite everyone to think about the breathing point that you make, Victoria, because it really does help you settle yourself and actually center yourself as well before you actually go into any meeting that you're facing, where maybe you're meeting somebody for the first time. It really does.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's nice to get into a little rhythm. So you might do a count of 4 to inhale, count of 4 to exhale, and it just forcing yourself to really pay attention to that, because attention's a real commodity in today's world. We have shorter and shorter attention spans.
So let us recap on what we've explored today. Very quickly, we've taken time to understand how you got here, noted the difference between a growth and a fixed mindset, recognized the various stages of change that you may well be going through, and considered the challenge or challenges you're facing, and then begun to create space to build a personal audit and understanding of who you are, and then thinking about how you can take your next step. Missed anything? Don't think so. Okay, well, look, let us take some questions. So I know that, Indy, you've been keeping an eye on the questions as they've been coming in. We've got a few minutes left. So where should we begin? What's good, Indy?
Yeah, we've got some questions coming through, so feel free to send some more questions through as we're going through them. So the first question is based on one of the quotes that you shared, Jeremy, which when we cannot change the world around us, we are forced to change ourselves. So the question is, does this mean that we settle and we are contented to things that we have or to the position we are currently in?
I think it really depends on each individual. Personally, I'm not someone who likes to settle. I have been in, and I guess I would describe it as an itch when I begin to realize that there is something not necessarily great with the situation I find myself in. And if that is the case, then I'm probably recognizing for myself that I've probably been there too long. And it's different for every person. That would be my first point. I think do we need to settle? If we're thinking that we're having to settle or questioning that, I think my response would be, then you might actually want to consider why you're there still. I think the other side of it is going to the motivators that we outlined, Indy, is saying, well, if my motivations are actually encouraging me to be in this role, then be happy with that. But if your motivations are saying, I need to think about doing something different because it's not satisfying me, then that's the moment to actually take stock and review where you are. And the Bruce quote is really focused on challenging circumstances. So very often we actually get into a situation without realizing that it's become challenging for us in whatever form it may be. And that's the moment where we actually need to challenge ourselves to actually move on and think about different things. So my answer, hopefully not too long-winded, it doesn't mean we have to settle, but what I would ask you to consider is, are you happy and do you feel fulfilled in the role that you're talking about?
Yeah, lovely. I really like that, just in terms of acknowledging where you are and also just checking in on actually what's motivating me, what's getting me out of bed in the morning. That's lovely. Victoria, are there any thoughts from your side?
I would say that I personally, there are elements in my life where I think, okay, that's out of my control. I'm going to make the best of what the current situation is. I think actually this whole pandemic has taught me that I was sort of putting up with it rather than making the best of it, you know? So I think that's helped me to make a bit of a shift. So if I really feel there's something where I cannot affect the change, then how do I make the best of the circumstances that I'm stuck in?
Yeah, lovely. Taking control of your mindset, as you guys have mentioned earlier on. Lovely. We've got another question here. So again, probably if we could get a response from each of you, that'd be lovely. So really simple. What's the best piece of advice you have ever received?
What a cool question.
Victoria.
Me first. Okay. Okay. So I think this is a quote from someone else who was quoting someone else. And it goes something like this. The work is more important than how you feel about it. So how do I apply that to myself? That means if I go and give a performance in a theatre production, or I go and run a training workshop 4 people in some sort of organization, if I come away from that feeling, oh, that wasn't quite right, oh, I should have done this better, oh, I should have done a bit more preparation on that. So I'll come away with a lot of criticism for myself. But overall, the work and the impact that either that production or that workshop has on those people, that's more important than how I feel about it. So I try to carry that with me whenever I'm feeling a little bit self-destructive or self-critical.
That's a nice one. I think, Indy, it was probably a client who said this to me quite early on when I was, as I mentioned, I didn't really pivot overnight to move from the arts into business. It probably took me 10 years over a period of time. But there was a client who told me to wake up, which is always a good piece of advice from a client that you actually want to keep. The point that he was making was that he said, you say you are here, but you're not here. And it was about being present, to the point that Victoria made earlier. And we were doing some good work with that client, but what we weren't doing was great work. And what the client was looking for was truly great work, was to actually say, and basically the client was saying to me and to my partner, you are way better than this, than what you are giving me. And I'm giving you one more chance to be better and deliver great work. So a wake-up call from someone who you both admire, but also at the same time you've probably been delivering okay work with them, was something quite substantial to me. And it really taught me a lot about actually being present, which I think is a really important point, but also recognizing when you are delivering great work and when your work is not at your best. And that is very personal to each person. So it's something that you need to reflect on. And we often talk about lessons learned, and actually taking our work away and reflecting on what worked well and what could be better. And I think that's something that we all need to do continuously, is actually say, how did that week go for me? What did I do well? So I think the best piece of advice is, you're here, but you're not here. It was a wake-up call in.
Lovely examples, thank you. We've got another question here, which is, when you are going through a crisis, how do you involve your partner and family members so that they are part of the change?
All right, I'll take that first and let Victoria think about it. But I think, honestly, I think it is about honesty. It is about asking your partner or your family members, saying, do you have the time to sit down and discuss with me where I am now? And I think that's a really quite a honest question to put to people who love you, and also whose advice that you are seeking, because it is only by providing the time for you that they're able to really help you. So actually getting them to sit down and say, I'm going to actually lay out the scenario, I'm going to lay out where we are now and the situation and how I feel about it, and I really want to value, and I really value your opinion and feedback. That's not to say I'm going to actually do anything you say, but I really would value a different point of view in this conversation. And for many of us, we may have been having that conversation that we want to have with our family members in our head on our own for some time. And actually just creating the space and being very honest with your partner or family member, saying, I need you to help me through this challenge that I'm facing. But in order to do that, you need to actually provide some space and time for me to lay it out and for you to respond. And I think that is probably the best way. If they only have 5 minutes in that moment, then say, let's try and find some more time, because you're not giving your problem or yourself the time that you deserve. And you're also doing a disservice to your family member or partner by actually not allowing them the time to think about it properly. So time and space, I do think, are critically important for that.
Yes, I completely agree. I think a word that's popping up in my head also is vulnerability. Sort of give yourself, when you do get to sit down and have the conversation, be vulnerable and try to articulate as best you can your feelings, the emotions that are going on inside of you, because people we can't really argue with one another's emotions, right? We feel what we feel. So it's really great if you're able to explain that, so that the other person realizes, because, so as you've said, we can have conversations in our heads, we can have so many feelings all at once, and it's really difficult to even our nearest and dearest. They can't always read what's going on. So be vulnerable and do share what you're feeling.
Yeah, lovely examples. I really resonate with that, because I think the conversation in your head is just so easy, and actually creating space to invite people in, even if it's you know, the informal relationships that you're surrounding yourself with day to day, is so important. And labeling that feeling, you know, really giving it a language and vocabulary. It's lovely. Okay, so we've got one final question here before we wrap up, which is, when thinking about the ideal role for ourselves, shall I aim higher, i.e. rank and salary, etc., or just follow our hearts, even if it means a lower rank and salary?
Okay, I would suggest to whoever put this question, what I would do is give yourself a grid, give yourself a graph, what we call a Boston grid. And on the left-hand axis, I would put salary and rank, and you know, it goes from 0 to whatever scale you want to do. And on the other scale, on the bottom scale, the horizontal scale, I will put passion and heart. Okay, and then what I would start to think about is the jobs that you are facing. So the lower ranked job, the higher ranked job, where do they sit for you? Where do they sit on that grid? And then start to think about, okay, so can I be the best that I can be in that job? What am I giving up if I'm going to go for the higher ranked job, in terms of passion and energy that I know fulfills me in my day? And what am I giving up if I am going for the lower ranked job, which is full of passion and energy for myself, but actually I'm giving up in terms of material reward? And in many ways, it is down to you. It is down to you to actually think about yourself and what you want to actually achieve and your future. But you can only do that by looking at it for yourself and thinking about what you are going to actually attain and what you are going to give up. And life, as we know, is a series of, in many ways, a series of compromises. We have to accept certain things, but at the same time, we can still actually challenge ourselves to go further and to go higher and to go better. So in that way, you need to consider what is good for you, what you would actually like to achieve, and then go back to that motivation wheel and actually go around that motivation wheel and think about both of those jobs through that lens, and then consider which way you would actually like to go. But I do think it is about taking time to create space for yourself to actually think about stuff in order to actually fulfill and answer that question.
Any thoughts from you, Victoria?
I thought it was beautifully put, Jeremy. And I was just looking back at the motivators as well. You know, there's another exercise in there. So it's either way, the Boston one or the motivators, it's got to be look inside yourself, I think.
Yeah. Such a great theme from today, just taking time to create space and think and reflect, and so powerful, especially during times of change. So thank you first of all, Victoria and Jeremy. Unfortunately, that's all we've got time for today. We've popped some email addresses up if anyone would like to get in touch after today, and a recording will be made available as well. And yeah, without further ado, thank you very much once again. Thank you for your time, and have a good afternoon wherever you are. Goodbye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Indy. Bye-bye.
Bye.